The House Judiciary Committee is holding its first formal Mueller report hearing next week. Everyone's waiting to see if Mueller himself will testify, and the Attorney General is also doubling down on what he publicly admits is an investigation of the investigators. Now, when you take these things together, there is actually one person who knows all of this firsthand, the origins of the Mueller probe. His name is James Baker, the former FBI general counsel. He was there when the Russia probe started, which later, of course, became the special counsel Mueller probe. He was the top FBI lawyer at James Comey's side up until Comey's firing. He's one of the few lawyers to work at the time, what lawyers call contemporaneously, as Comey continued to be more alarmed by Donald Trump's behavior, to write down conversations that later became criminal evidence, including the infamous loyalty pledge. And that's one reason this man's name keeps coming up.
He says he told the general counsel of the FBI, James Baker.
We now know Comey sent the draft to his deputy director, Andrew McCabe, general counsel James Baker.
He was tweeting about James Baker, the former general counsel. Tell us why this James Baker news is important.
James Baker was the top lawyer at the FBI.
It was based on testimony by now a former FBI general counsel, James Baker.
Joining me for his first interview on the beat is former FBI general counsel James Baker, now director of national security at the R Street Institute, a nonprofit policy research organization. Good evening to you.
Hey, how are you? Thank you.
I'm great. As we all remember, you were a man at the center of it and for a long time weren't speaking because of that. When you look at it all told and the Mueller report mostly out in redacted form, what should Americans' bottom line understanding be of what Bob Mueller found?
That the Russian Federation poses a serious threat to the United States, to our security, to the security of our elections, that, as he described it, the elements of the Russian military and intelligence forces were engaged in a concerted attack. That was the word that he used, that Director Mueller used, an attack on our political system. And we should be very, very alarmed by that. So, look, we started an investigation to ask the question about what the Russians were up to, and Director Mueller answered that question, and he found that the Russians posed a significant threat, and he also found that certain persons in the United States, some of them connected to the Trump campaign, had interactions with the Russians that ultimately did not amount to a criminal conspiracy, but they were questions that needed to be answered, and it was a legitimate, in my opinion, a legitimate investigation from the get-go. Everything you just said is about Volume 1. You didn't say anything about Volume 2, the analysis of the president's potential criminal obstruction. On balance, does the Mueller report show that Donald Trump committed criminal activity in office or not, in your view? Well, so he refrains, obviously, as we all know now, he refrains from making that kind of a conclusion. And the way I think about it is, even if the conduct described in Volume 2 with respect to obstruction isn't technically a criminal act that can be indicted at this point in time, it certainly should be unacceptable in the United States. The pattern of corruption that you see... Was it criminal obstruction, in your view? In my view, he certainly lays out several instances that meet all of the elements that provide a sufficient factual basis, I think, for all of the elements of the crime of obstruction as it's articulated in federal law today. And what do you say to viewers, because I talk to our viewers sometimes, who say, you had that Baker guy on, he was in the room, he's so informed, he's so responsible, he's so smart. Why didn't he say yes when you asked if it was criminal obstruction? Is there a reason why Mueller and you and many of these people who we have respect for the integrity and the public service don't just say yes? Because that seems to be where, as we head into these hearings next week, the country, part of the country, people are asking, well, yes or no, a binary question. I'm not answering that question specifically because I take Director Mueller's point about trying to accuse somebody of a crime in a situation where, A, I'm not there, I don't know all the evidence. I've read the report, but I don't know all the evidence that stands behind that. But B, the person in question here would not have an opportunity, the president would not have an opportunity to clear his name in a court of law. I think that was a prudent decision by Director Mueller. It makes sense, but anyway, that's where I would leave it at this moment. Mr. Barr, the new Attorney General, has talked about investigating the people who began all this, presumably or probably including you. Take a look. Sure. Yep.
We should be worried about whether government officials abuse their power and put their thumb on the scale. And so I'm not saying that happened, but I'm saying that we have to look at that.
Is that the right approach for the sitting attorney general, to sort of publicize that suspicion without offering evidence or without waiting to see what the evidence shows, especially given that there's already an internal IG process, et cetera?
Well, look, I mean, the Attorney General needs to be confident that we did an appropriate job. I understand that. He needs to have confidence in what the intelligence community and the law enforcement community at the FBI was doing, and I welcome the review. If the review is done fairly, if it's done professionally, if it's done in an apolitical way, and it serves to instill confidence in more Americans about what it is that we did, then fine. I'm okay with it.
Can I press you on that? And this is the first time we're talking. And
no, go for it.
I say this interested in the substance, not impugning the view you put forward. But what you're describing is a kind of a by the book, the process will work, and in the end, everything will thus work out. And I wonder whether, is there a part of you that ever questions whether that old model, which can work, doesn't in an environment of selective disclosure, of Twitter attacks by the president, accusing people of being rats, maligning people like yourself, maligning Mr. McCabe, who you served with, denying him his pension in a very unusual manner, going after people's family, going after Mr. McCabe's wife. I mean, I think our viewers remember some of this, and saying that the idea that when you guys in law enforcement take on the tough assignments of investigating the powerful people, and it triggers an investigation into you that could last however long and cost however much, that itself could have a chilling effect on the hardest thing to do in law enforcement, from some of the sources I talked to, which is to investigate big people no matter where the facts may lead.
So look, on the one hand, I want the American people to be confident in the FBI, and I want them to be confident in us, the people that made these decisions under very difficult circumstances. That's number one. Number two is I know we didn't do anything wrong. And so I feel confident that after a thorough review, if it's done, as I said, professionally and fairly, that will be
so you're not worried about the sort of the
conclusion.
public side of it, the way they use stuff?
Well, no, I'm worried about, I am worried about the effect long-term on institutions like the FBI with respect to the number and volume and intensity of the public statements that some officials have made with respect to us, you know, references about a coup, treason, sedition, these type of things. They're unwarranted. They're not supported by the facts. It's inappropriate, and it serves to undermine the institution. I do worry whether it will result in people in the institution today being nervous about, you know, going after hard cases and doing the right thing. It is worrisome. I agree with you on that for sure.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.